The Naked Capitalist by W. Cleon, what was he, Skousen? What would you call that? What would you say?
Skousen. I don't know.
W. Cleon Skousen. A review and commentary on Dr. Carroll Quigley's book, Tragedy and Hope. So,
where is this published by, real quick? What's the publisher? It's like a John Birch Society thing?
I have no idea. Published as a private edition by the reviewer. So he's published. That's self. I guess that's a fancy way of saying self-published, right?
Yeah.
So, The Naked Capitalist. So you've read probably, 900 pages worth of Tragedy and Hope? Yeah. I've read 20 pages of this commentary, and I feel like I know just as much as you. It's like a good crib note, good crib sheet on. It's good stuff. Very interesting. Actually, reading this, I don't like reading stuff like this, and I don't think I want to read Tragedy and Hope anymore because this makes me feel extremely helpless.
Well, he's. Well, go ahead and say what you got to say. The juicy stuff this guy talks about is late. Like some of it's later in the book. Like particularly the ending bit. I don't have any intention of reading the last 100 pages of the book. But maybe I will read it just to get pissed off. It's like reading J.J. Gold. I took a break from it for J.J. I took a break from it for a number of other books. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, the reason it makes me feel hopeless, it feels like he says that the reviewer here, the Skousen, writes that Quigley wrote this book about the machinations of basically the New World Order, whatever you want to call it, international capital, the Jews, whatever you want to characterize it as their scheme, like, it's over. Like, they've won, and he's writing this book about what they've done and how they do it because there's nothing you can do about it to stop it anymore. And
that's what he thinks?
Yes, and that partial, if I want to find the little phrase in here. So why did Quigley write this book? His answer appears 979 to 980 on page. He says, in effect, that it is now too late for the little people to turn back the tide. In a spirit of kindness, he is therefore urging them not to fight the noose which is already around their necks. He feels certain that those who do will only choke themselves to death. On the other hand, those who go along with the immense pressure which is beginning to be felt by all humanity will eventually find themselves in a man-made millennium of peace and prosperity. All through this book, Dr. Quigley assures us that we can trust these benevolent, well-meaning men who are secretly operating behind the scenes. They are the hope of the world. All who resist them represent tragedy. Hence the title for the book.
I mean that might not be a. We'll have to see. I haven't gotten to the total end yet of it, but it's like, all right. What I found valuable in the book was the first of all the discussion of the international bankers and the way that the economic machinations that went on in the 19th century and then in the interwar period were essentially giving. Now, he is a little bit schizophrenic there. At one point, he praises them. He's very pro-British. He's very anti-German. He praises these people, but then he also he praises them, but then he also then says like that he didn't like how selfish these bankers were and that they were leading the public in the wrong way. But then he also says, "Oh, but look how beneficial they were. Look how all these things." Now, one of the things you said, this guy hard countersignals the Jewish element.
Yeah, I'm looking for that next.
Allow me to read a couple of paragraphs from the book, from Tragedy and Hope, that I have queued up here. So, talking about the international banking cartels, families, and he says, the names of some of these banking families are familiar to all of us and should be more so. They include Baring, Lazard, Erlanger, Warburg, Schroeder, Seligman, the Spires, Mirabaud, Mallet, Bold, and above all, Rothschild and Morgan. Now, he goes on after that to say, even after these banking families became fully involved in domestic industry by the emergence of financial capitalism, they remained different from ordinary bankers in distinctive ways. 1, they were cosmopolitan and international. 2, they were close to governments and were particularly concerned with questions of government debts, including foreign government debts, even in areas which seemed at first glance poor risks, like Egypt, Persia, Ottoman Turkey, Imperial China, and Latin America. 3, their interests were almost exclusively in bonds and very rarely in goods, since they admired liquidity and regarded commitments in commodities or even real estate as the first step towards bankruptcy. 4, they were accordingly fanatical devotees of deflation, which they called sound money, from its close associations with high interest rates and a high value of money, and the gold standard, which in their eyes symbolized and ensured these values. Now, this is prior to World War II. This was the attitude. 5, they were almost equally devoted to secrecy and the secret use of financial influence in political life. These bankers came to be called international bankers, and more particularly were known as merchant bankers in England, private bankers in France, and investment bankers in the United States. In all countries, they carried on various kinds of banking and exchange activities, but everywhere they were sharply distinguishable from other more obvious kinds of banks, such as savings banks or commercial banks. One of their less obvious characteristics was that they remained as private unincorporated firms, usually partnerships until relatively recently, offering no shares, no reports, and usually no advertising to the public. This risky status, which deprived them of limited liability, was retained in most cases until modern inheritance taxes made it essential to surround such family wealth with the immortality of corporate status for tax avoidance purposes. This persistence as private firms continued because it ensured the maximum of anonymity and secrecy to persons of tremendous public power who dreaded public knowledge of their activity as an evil almost as great as inflation. Now, I want to go back to those 12 names he lists, and I'm just going to go through. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Baring, English; Lazard, Jewish; Warburg, Jewish; Erlanger, Jewish; Schroeder, German; Seligman, Jewish; Speyer, Jewish; Mirabaud, Swiss; Mallet, French; Fold, Jewish; Rothschild, Jewish, and Morgan was American. However, I don't know much about Mirabaud, Mallet, or Schroeder, but I do know that in terms of Baring and Morgan, there's all kinds of rumors of Jewish involvement there and actual Jews involved in those firms. Of course, Baring's Bank went down, I believe, in the 90s, or was it in the early 2000s? I can't remember. Baring's Bank folded about 15 or so years ago. I don't know. I don't know what the circumstances of that were. I can't remember. I was younger when it happened. I didn't pay much attention. But so here we have. I think that what's remarkable here is, one, from each country of these 12 names of the 5 wealthiest countries. From each, there's only one Gentile family named, and the rest are all Jewish. Yet Quigley completely does not remark on the Jewish issue. He doesn't even remark on it to the point to discredit it. It's just left unremarked.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And it's quite remarkable. And I think that it would be, given what we know about the Jews, given that we know what kind of people they are, given that we know how ethnocentric they are, how cliquish they are, how absolutely, everything we know about them, to not remark on this massive, even if we take it for granted that the 5 are all Gentiles, which we don't necessarily take for granted that those organizations are completely Gentile, and that the 7 are Jews, that overrepresentation is still crazy. And then he talks about how they're international, they're secretive, all this stuff, right? And he doesn't remark on the Jewish element here at all. That is quite remarkable. So this guy has something to say as well. Which is why I'm
look at his face. I mean, is this like a defensive action? Like, what is that? Is that a Jewy face? I can't even tell. He just looks so.
It could be this guy. This guy to me looks like a fucking Bircher. This guy reminds me of this is what this is the kind of thing that this reminds me of. But he's critical of capitalism, or is he critical of like free market capitalism, or is he only critical of like the crony capitalism?
So far he's only critical of banks. He's not critical of capitalism. So like you're like stage 1 that Quigley talks about, where it's just like laissez-faire, and I have goods that I trade with you for in the government. So stay the hell out of that. Yeah. But he just he's critical of these banking families and what they've set up and how they've enabled their money management. Is money management the right word for it? Like that they manage the monetary policy of these countries, and therefore they control these governments, and that everything about the politics within that country is basically a sham, because it's whatever happens, whatever they want to. And as I said, it's like a very helpless feeling to read that, because he writes in here.
I would take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. Not necessarily that there's an accuracy to the sort of power structure there, but the idea that we can't do anything about it. I will never accept that.
Right. Well, it's just when I read it, when I think about what was I thinking about it? Maybe think of all these banking interests and what they do, and the inverted triangle of gold on hand, and then deposits, and then notes. And
but that's over with. I mean, there's no gold standard anymore.
Well, okay, but you still have an inverted triangle of just notes and deposits, and notes, and also, now you have keystrokes at the very end of it.
Well, the end of it is the lending, the way that it works now is that banks all have to have a certain amount of reserves with the Federal Reserve. They have to have an account at the Federal Reserve that has to have a certain amount of deposits. on that basis they can lend.
Okay.
And that's why they want to get your money into a bank account. And then so basically they just took the gold point out. It's now just you know.
What I was just saying is the way the system is established, and that they have, which bank was this had in their charter? The Bank of England. The bank hath benefit of interest on all monies which it creates out of nothing.
Yeah,
so like, oh God!
The Bank of England, William Patterson created it in 1690 something or other.
It just makes me think
he basically said that openly. Yes,
it just makes me think of when I was watching Clinton Cash. There was that little Breitbart documentary about the real the Uranium One scandal, the real Russian scandal of the election involving the Clintons. And you follow that rabbit hole down all these people who own all these little companies and how they're all intertwined. It's like these are all like firms and interests you would never know about. The average person would have no idea they even exist or what they do. And even if they're reading about them, I can't really explain what some of these companies do, but they are all comprised of like super rich and a ton of money flows through there, or they hold a ton of money and they invest it and just like grab a bunch of interest off this. It just seems like this entire mountain of invented money from this scheme is like standing in the way of our, I hate to sound like a faggot, but like freedom.
No, it's true.
As people, it's very scary. But to go back to what we were teasing was like, so Skousen writes, was this a Jewish conspiracy? It should be noted in passing that while the Rothschilds and certain other Jewish families cooperated together in these ventures, this was not by no means a Jewish monopoly, as some have alleged. Neither was it a Jewish conspiracy, as we shall see men of finance of many nationalities and many religious or non-religious backgrounds collaborated together to create this superstructure of economic and political power, which Dr. Quigley is about to disclose. No student of the global conspiracy could fall for the Hitlerian doctrine that the root of all evil is a super Jewish conspiracy, nor should they fall for that long since discredited document, the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which Hitler palmed off to the German people as an authentic declaration of policy by an all-Jewish Congress. The spurious origin of this document was proven decades ago and serves as an object lesson for those who are inclined to accept an oversimplified explanation for the rise of the global power structure which has snared mankind. Some would answer this by saying that the Anti-Defamation League and other Jewish organizations have been in the forefront of collectivist movement and also in the suppression of American voices seeking to warn the nation. However, this infiltration of the Jewish community is no more applicable to the Jewish people as a whole than the scurrious left-wing activities of the national and world councils of churches is a reflection on all Protestants, or the liberal, irreligious Catholic left-wing as a reflection on all Catholics. In studying the global conspiracy, it is important to keep in mind that it was not any particular race or religion, but the passion for money and power, which has drawn the tycoons of the world finance into a tightly knit mutual aid society. Dr. Quigley identifies this group as the international bankers.
All right, so
very tiresome.
I get what he's saying, and the important thing to understand here, and we talked about this a little bit on Strike and Mike when I talked about how J.J. Goldberg says in his book, he actually admits more than this guy will. Now, we have to understand it's more than just the money power, it's the social power too. And this is where Jews reign absolutely supreme. So the money power, there are powerful and wealthy Gentiles as well, and some of them are involved in banking and such. It's not purely a money power conspiracy. That is a one-dimensional way to look at it. But when you look at social power as well, then you bring Jews into the question, and that is where Jews have a near monopoly. They have a near monopoly on social power, on social narratives, and things like that. And as J.J. Goldberg says in his book, Jews are not just liberal. They're essential to liberalism. And as Stryker said, which I thought was a good insight, was that Jews are the only people that go to bat ideologically for liberalism, for hardcore liberalism, not like classical liberalism, not like live and let live. As long as you do what you want, keep it private, don't harm others, like that sort of classical liberalism. That's you see Gentiles doing that, but the kind of thing like the real disgusting liberalism, the stuff that we don't like, like the idea, and we was talking the thing we were talking about the Jesse Helms in the Prayer in School, where he's like only Jews would be the ones to step up and be like no, because the instinct of Gentiles there, the instinct of whites was to be like, well, the Constitution doesn't forbid religion, it allows it. So if we have a place where children can pray if they wish at school, there's nothing wrong with that. But Jews are like, no, you can't have that. Jews are the only people that are going to do that. And as Goldberg himself admitted, the other two groups that was spearheaded, the anti-prayer in school was spearheaded by the ADL, and why? No one's looking to defame Jews. Why is the ADL involved in anti-prayer in school? It's not people aren't sitting and going into rooms talking about kikes.
Don't they want to pray?
No.
Jews don't want to pray?
Well, they have their own secret places that they pray that you're not allowed in.
Oh, not at school.
But, yeah, they don't want it. They don't want them praying at school because if you see Jews pray at school, you realize how fucking weird and different they are because of the shit that they're doing. They're like rocking back and forth and doing weird shit. Like, no, you don't want to see that. They don't want you to see that. So they hide when they pray. They don't want us to see it. There's a reason for that. But like, so why is the ADL? No one's going into the room if they're going to go pray. No one's going in there to defame Jews. So why is the ADL involved? And then, of course, then you have the ACLU and People for the American Way, which Goldberg casts as non-sectarian
the wrestler
organizations. Oh. Yes, the wrestler. This book was written by the wrestler Goldberg.
The bald one that doesn't chug beer.
Yes.
Basically the cuck.
Yes.
Fuck Goldberg. You want Steve Austin.
Anyway, you derailed what was a good point, but that's okay.
It was a good joke, though.
Yeah, so the thing is that the other two groups, PFAW and the ACLU, are all Jewish in origin, and essentially Jewish in... and as I've said, PFAW, People for the American Way, founded by Norman Lear.
Oh, God.
The famous broadcaster Norman Lear, is who now...
Write me another anti-white sitcom, Norman.
Yeah, in his old age is... he's the guy behind All in the Family, among others. In his old age, that guy always he wears like rainbow flag ties and shit like that. You ever see pictures of him now? What an asshole. Anyway, so he started People for the American Way. People for the American Way does Right Wing Watch and Hate Watch and all that stuff, and they employ Jared Holt, who I'm not sure if he's a Jew or not. Doesn't matter. He's a shitbag either way. He's a piece of shit. He's garbage, and he's not a journalist. He's just a spy. But yeah. So Goldberg points out that socially, Jews are the necessary element of liberalism. Now, there would be liberal Gentiles. There would be people that were, but the idea would not be the way it is now with this media monopoly and this all encompassing. I mean, these guys leaving out the media entirely. That's one of the things that's frustrating about A Tragedy in Hope, too, is that he's like, I'm going to write history from a more economic point of view than just political. But he leaves out a lot of social life there, too. That's one of the big problems. So he does the economic history. So when you read the section he writes on Weimar Germany, he talks a lot about the economics and the political developments with the parties and the votes and the this and that and the development of how the Nazis got this much more votes year after year after year, whatever. He never tells you about the social developments within the Weimar Republic. He completely leaves it out. So that's where Tragedy and Hope is weak. And that's also, I'm sure, where this guy is weak, is the social power of Jews. That is what, and that's why you get, grabbing by the ballot, weird fucking freaky trannies, out there as if like presented to you as if this is something you're supposed to please clap to. So, yeah.
Please clap. I was trying to find Shapiro's tweet.
And that's tyrannical as well, the social tyranny. There's the economic tyranny. But people could almost live with that. It's the social tyranny. They're not letting us live with this economy that we have. Yeah. We are not allowed to live how we want within it. We are not allowed to live as we want. We are not allowed to live as whites. We are not allowed to create the kinds of social spaces that we want. Then that's as important as the economic element. And if we try to do it, we will be excluded from this economy. That's where the economic tyranny comes in. Comes in for the ability of them to exclude you completely from the economy. And it seems like if there are Gentile families, if there are white families involved in this cabal of people controlling the economy, they certainly aren't ever going to go to bat for us. So it doesn't matter if they're not entirely Jewish. If the whole thing is not entirely 100% Jewish. I mean, that's an easy straw man to set up. Well, it's not 100% Jewish. Well, why? 7 out of the 12 biggest families are Jewish. Yeah. And you're telling me that's insignificant. Get the fuck out of here.